I'm going to hit on a story right now, and I'm very curious to get not only David's thoughts, but I will obviously get his thoughts on what he thinks um, if a season could resume or not with Major League Baseball. But I'm interested because for the most part, anytime we've heard public comments, it's been from the player side discussing why they don't feel a pay cut or second pay cut, I should say, is right. We've yet to hear from any owners because I think that's part of the frustration, at least for me personally, is that the owners keep trying to implement a second pay cut and keep claiming that they will operate at a loss, they will lose all this massive money if the players don't take a second pay cut and they have to play the entire season without fans. And I'll be honest, part of me, seeing how the owners have operated in the past, seeing how the owners are trying to actively suppress the free agent market and trying to lower wages as much as possible, I have a tough time believing an owner when they cry poor. So I'm going to ask you, do you believe an owner if they try to cry poor? Because Tom Ricketts, the Cubs owner, spoke at the ESPN on Tuesday and basically tried to state his case as to why we should feel for the owners of baseball, why they are desperate, let's say, to save some money, and why the season cannot absolutely resume if the players don't take a second pay cut. So I'll read a few quotes. I'll throw some commentary in there, but I'd love to get your thoughts. If you believe him, flat up, if you believe him. We'll ask David Sampson, again, someone who's in the Miami Marlins front office for a very long time, on if he believes Tom Ricketts. And so the first quote that stood out to me was that Tom Ricketts, again, the Cubs owner, told ESPN this, quote, "Most baseball owners don't take money out of their team. They raise all the revenue they can from tickets and media rights, and they take out their expenses, and they give all the money left to their GM to spend," end quote. So to paraphrase, basically, the owners, they get all their revenue. Once their expenses are taken out, that lump sum of money they have left goes basically right to the GM and say, spend this, put this in payroll, invest it back into the team. Now, in the case of the Cubs, sure, maybe Tom Ricketts is correct. Last year, they had a $220 million payroll, third highest in baseball back in 2019. For sure, that is not the case with every Major League Baseball team. Last year, MLB's average team revenue was $330 million. Are you telling me every single team is taking that $330 million and after expenses are taken out, putting all that money basically back into payroll, back into the team? And the Mets, I'm a huge Mets fan. They're in the New York market, one of the biggest media market in baseball. They had the 13th highest payroll last year. Are you really telling me that the Mets are taking all their revenues, all their profits, and throwing it back into salary, putting it back into the players? No. So I've seen them. We've heard the Wilpons have money, pocket it, and not want to spend. So I'm not convinced at all that teams are taking their profits and putting it back into the team. You have teams like the Rays, teams like the Marlins, teams like the Pirates, who if they're getting $330 million average, or maybe slightly below, because it is an average, below that, their payrolls are extremely low. $40 million, $50 million, $60 million. So you're telling me, they are basically putting all their profits possible back into the team? I'm sorry, you can't convince me. Not just that. Think about this from just an owner's perspective and an investment perspective, right? Because that's really what owning a team is. It is an investment. You don't buy a team to actually try to win on the field. You buy a team because it's a moneymaker, and you're trying to build your brand and try to build up your bank account. So, but if that was the case, right? If let's say you make $400 million in revenue, $300 million in expenses, so you have $100 million left right there as profit, sitting for you. Well, if they were true, like what owner would buy a team knowing that okay, that $100 million instead of splitting it up or paying out some dividends or putting it in our pocket, we have to invest it back into the team? What money are they making? They wouldn't own a team if they weren't churning out a profit and pocketing some sort of money every single year. These owners aren't buying the team just so that they can sell it one day at a crazy price, right? Because most of these, some owners unfortunately do pass away before they can even, sell the team and get the fruits of their labor. So they're not into owning a team just because, basically they're in it at the end. They can sell it for a massive profit and a massive markup. They wouldn't be owning a team if they weren't getting money year in and year out. So I have a tough team. I have a tough time, Tom, believing you that you say, basically all these owners, they get the revenues. Once the expenses are taken out, they tell the GM, hey, this is the money, go spend it and make our team better. I'm sorry, I can't believe that. I cannot believe that. So he went on, speaking of cash and speaking of money, Tom Ricketts would say this, quote, "The league itself does not make a lot of cash. I think there is a perception that we hoard cash and we take money out and it's all sitting in a pile we've collected over the years," end quote. So now he's claiming the league does not make a lot of cash. The perception is that they make a lot of cash and they sit on that cash, which I still believe to this day, and that it's sitting in a pile that we've collected over the years. Well, let me run a few numbers by it, and I've brought these numbers up before in the past, so they sound familiar. But last year, the MLB gross revenue for the entire league was $10.7 billion with a B. $10.7 billion gross revenue for the entire league in 2019. 17th consecutive season that those revenues have increased. So each year for 17 straight years, the revenue was higher than the year before. Obviously, simple math. But not just that. Excuse me. 29 of the 30 teams are valued over $1 billion. And the Kansas City Royals, in a small market in Kansas City, just sold for $1 billion. So there's a ton of cash that is going into the league year in and year out. Now, if you're not that liquid, if you need cash, you could sell assets, sell equity if you need a short-term solution here. But you can't tell me that the league is not like, how can you say the league itself does not make a lot of cash? You brought in $10.7 billion last year. 29 of the 30 teams are valued over $1 billion. Revenues keep on going up. 17 straight years. More money has come in the previous year. How can you tell me they don't make a lot of cash? And let's just say, if this was true, if this was the case, this is another frustration I think that players have and the public has. Why not open up your books? Why not show us the hard evidence that your accounting department does and show us that, yeah, you know what, despite us making all this money, we truly are, cash strapped. Despite us making, bringing in $10.7 billion as a league last year, we really don't have as much money as you think. And guess what? All the money that we do make, we do invest it in the team. We do invest into player salaries or the stadium or some sort to make the team better. That's why there's such a distrust between the players and the owners. The owners are crying poor. The players don't believe them. They say, show us our books. Show us the hard evidence. Show us the proof. And guess what? The owners have done nothing. Nothing. So the question is, what are they hiding? Because at least from reading what I've said, I read you Max Scherzer's statement on Twitter, I believe it was last week, basically saying that, until you show us the books, nothing's going to happen. We're not going to believe you. I do believe if owners were truthful and they truly were losing as much money as they claim, and they opened up the books and proved it, and the money and the numbers back that up, I think the players would be more open to taking a second pay cut than they are right now. But because it's basically just he said, she said, there's no trust at all to begin with. And the owners, after being asked to show them their books, after being asked to give us the proof, haven't done it yet. So why should the players believe them? Why should us as the public believe them? I don't. There's another reason why I just think trying to say that, Tom Ricketts here trying to cry poor is not a fair statement at all and is not telling the full truth. It does get better, though. Let's continue because, again, Tom Ricketts had a lot to say on Tuesday when we were talking to ESPN, the owner of the Cubs. He said, quote, "The scale of losses across the league is biblical. The timing of the work stoppage, the inability to play right before the season started, we're looking at 30 teams with zero revenue. To cover the losses, all teams have gone out and borrowed. There's no other way to do it in the short run. In the long run, we may be able to sell equity to cover some of our losses, but that's in the long run. Who would invest at the moment?" So partly Ricketts is here. He's correct. Unlike the NBA, unlike the NHL, they've gotten no games played, meaning zero revenue has come in. So the only way they're going to actually make some money is through the television deals for however long these games are played. Or however long, I should say, the season is, how many games are actually played. Right? So sure, he's right that right now, the owners have gotten no money. They've had to borrow some money to at least pay the players up front and to keep them afloat. But I'll say this. Again, these investments, buying a baseball team is not a short-term money grab. You don't get it to flip it in 2, 3, 4 years for a major profit. These are long-haul ventures you get into for 10, 20, 30, 50, 100 years. Some are family-owned. And these franchises have only gotten more valuable with age. So I'll say this. Saying the scale of losses across the league is biblical. Trying to kind of, I guess, make it, more pronounced than catastrophic or historic, biblical. Something that will only, be written in the Bible is one, a major stretch. But two, I'm sorry, because these are long-term ventures, because you are owning teams, and again, it's not one of those, it's not a stock, right, where the stock goes down, you sell it, and you get out of there. This is something that you're only, it's only increasing in value as it goes on. You own it for a long time. So one season operating at a loss isn't going to be crippling. It's not going to put you into poverty, and you're not going to lose your life savings over it. So sure, borrowing isn't ideal. You buy a team because you don't plan to lose money, you plan to make money. I get that. But there's no guarantee. As we've seen, for the most part, when all things are equal, the profits are up and the money's coming in. But this year, as we know, is not equal. So 1 year in a shortened season, lost profits, okay, you play, hopefully grow your fan base, and then in 2021, 2022, get back to normal and get back to growing the revenues. And again, the long term, you make up the money that you lost here in 2020. And I'll finish up with this finally. Ricketts had one more quote, and this was directly contrasting what we talked about on Monday with Buster Olney reporting that there's a group of owners not wanting to play. Tom Ricketts said, quote, there are scenarios where not playing at all can be a better financial option, but we're not looking at that. We want to play. We want to get back on the field. I'm not aware of any owners that don't want to play. We just want to get back on the field in a way that doesn't make that we just want to get back on the field, in a way that doesn't make this season financially worse for us, end quote. So again, going back to not being able to believe what an owner's saying, trying to be able to believe them when they are crying poor. We discussed on Monday. If you missed it on Monday, Buster Olney, a long-time respected MLB insider at ESPN, had a column out there that he has heard from sources. There's a pool of owners, didn't say how big, but it sounds like so far a small minority of owners that are perfectly willing not to play in 2020. There's a small group that, you know what, they see this, and Tom Ricketts pointed out, it's financially a better option to not play this year, not lose more money, pack it up and play next year. And that the small minority owners, whether it's 2, 3, 4, 5, are actively trying to convince the others to not play. And I'll say this, I believe Buster Olney way the hell more than I believe Tom Ricketts. So to say that there's no owners out there that are basically not trying to convince the owners not to play, to say that everyone wants to get back on the field and playing, I just can't believe that's true. I believe it is a better financial option to not play this year. I think that makes sense. The expense is going to be way higher than the revenues. But again, this is not a short-term 1-year solution. For the growth of baseball, for the betterment of baseball, you have to be playing this year in order to benefit 2021, 2022, 2023. I've said it on Monday. I think I even said it last Thursday. It's a short-term loss for a long-term gain. So to be honest, the owners crying poor for me is a losing battle. I read these comments by Tom Ricketts. I kind of laugh, kind of roll my eyes because for the most part, trying to justify why you're trying to have players that make a way the hell less than you, trying to justify why they should take a second pay cut. To me, again, unless they open up the books, unless they have the actual proof out there, I don't believe these claims they're making. And we had Jared Diamond on last Thursday. I asked Jared that question. Well, Jared, if the owners are claiming that they're going to lose all this money, why don't they just actually show us? And he said, well, there's a reason why they're not showing you. Said it without really saying it.